If you like our work, you like our talk, and you love film, you can keep us caffeinated at buymeacoffee.com/watchrickramos. That's buymeacoffee.com/watchrickramos, or scroll down to the link on our Apple Podcast page on the podcast app. Many, many thanks to Cornelius Burrows, Slim, someone, and someone else, and others, for being the angels of cinema that walk among us, and with their coffee free us from the earth.
I've said it a number of times before. I've said it in the past, and I'll continue to say it. One of the great things about doing this show is being able to revisit old films, to discover new films, to recognize the beauty and brilliance of cinema. This past couple of months, Mr. Chavez and I have been on this descent into movies, and we've been discovering classics, Bresson's Alhazard Balthazar, um, how that morphed into EO, moving into Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. Um, we went into Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void last week, and I think I think it would be an accurate description to say that we were both impressed by parts, put off by others, um, at
I
odds.
wasn't. I don't think I was put out as
Put
much
out?
as you. I don't. I don't.
No,
I
no,
don't think I
no,
was
not as
really.
much as me. Not definitely not as much
I
as
don't
me
even think. I mean, I don't even know like at all.
at all.
But I mean,
Okay.
by what? I'm
um,
just saying.
no, no, I get
By,
it. I get it. But for me, um, there was beauty in imagery. There was beauty in a new type of storytelling that took chances and made an effort to do something new. I admired that. But one of the things that's great about these ping ponging episodes that we've been doing back and forth, leading us from one idea to another idea, and this thing of triggering past films or films that we've wanted to see, I think is digging into different types of storytelling. Um,
hmm
so Enter the Void, this descent into drug induced hallucination, this bridge between life and death, between the afterlife and existence. Um, it took a while to find something that made me want to explore that from a slightly different perspective. And then during our discussion of the film, it really hit me that we should be going back to Adrian Lyne's 1990 Jacob's Ladder, starring Tim Robbins, Elizabeth Pena, Danny Aiello, and as I watched this film, I was instantly transported back to 1990, 15 years old, trying to understand what it was exactly I was seeing. I mean, I remember seeing this film. I know I didn't see it in a theater. If I remember correctly, the film was in and out of theaters so quickly that it was lost. And I think watching it now, I think it's impossible to imagine um, a film of its abrasiveness and power. It's power. It's powerful imagery being able to intrigue an audience. I think it would be so off-putting, even though it looks somewhat sedate at this point. There are moments in it that are incredibly disturbing. Um, Specifically, I'm thinking of a black man with no legs and a black mask, body still, on a platform, shaking head back and forth. that kind of thing. People with deformities. Elizabeth Benya being 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 fucked on a dance floor in a room full of people by a demon, possibly the devil. Um, and the one and the shot that for some reason I don't know why most disturbed me was um, the Tim Robbins character Jacob being gurneyed down a hall further and further into the bowels of this hospital from a normal, although weather beaten and aged and um, tired looking hospital, but normal, into varying levels of what I think is not too far fetched to imagine as Dante's Inferno, going further and further down into the circles of hell, through an insane asylum, through the insanity of 1970s New York hospitals, into this torture chamber, basically, and specifically the gurney where Lyne did this thing where he took one wheel of the gurney and elevated it just a few millimeters, maybe just a millimeter off the ground, so that it never exactly reached the ground. And as the gurney was being rolled through these corridors, that wheel just spun frantically back and forth, clockwise, counterclockwise, jiggling, jangling. It was there was something about that was incredibly disturbing. I remember seeing this movie probably on a Tower Records video rental, a Tuesday night $1.50 rental, when that was a thing that we've spoken at so many times in the past on this show. Enter the Void made me go back to this, and I'm really interested in hearing where this conversation is gonna go, because I'm really interested in hearing your take on this particular film. What did you think of it? How long ago? How
This
long
film,
had it been since you've seen it? First of all,
since the early 2000s,
okay.
I rented it. It was one of those box rentals.
Hmm.
This film made me go back to Enter the Void.
Did it?
Yeah, yeah. And it was. I kind of think of it the way that we had seen Ozar Baltazar, and then we saw Io,
Hmm.
and you felt that the Bresson Baltazar film was, I guess, you connected with that one more, and I connected with Io
Yeah.
more.
Hmm.
And I think it's an illustration doing this exercise of bouncing films back and forth, because it on the one hand it gets beyond like the rational mind to say, well, this is what I want to talk about because this is what, maybe we have some kind of agenda, whether it's agenda coming from our rational mind or from a
Yeah.
deeper place. Still, we're like, well, you know what? At the very least, I want to talk about this for whatever reason, right? I want to talk about this movie.
Yeah.
I want to talk about X-Men or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, as an idea that you get, and you have this concept, and okay, cool. Um, if you go the way we're doing it, stuff is going to come out that, and I've said this before, stuff is going to come out that you weren't anticipating, and you're going to go into other places that you're going to watch other films that maybe they're not, you know about them, but you don't remember them, or you don't whatever.
Yeah.
It's more, it has more randomness, but at the same time, beyond that, I think the beauty of it is that it also reveals more about ourselves. To us also, I mean, to the listener's like, well, no shit, this is not some deep revelation that whatever, but I think it does, if it reveals more about us, but at the same time it confirms shit that it's about us, and maybe it can also reveal our by revealing our kind of like our inclinations in terms of cinema, it can also show us like maybe our weaknesses in terms of our cinema watching or our cinema prejudices or our
Mm-hmm.
cinema, you know what I mean? Like, I think it makes sense that you didn't like Into the Void as much as you like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense that I like Into the Void more than I like this.
Mm.
I think it makes sense. And having said that, I'm not just going to kind of like double down on my own inclination anyway and say, well, of course I like Into the Void more, so I'm going to argue more for Into the Void.
Yeah.
I can do that, and to a certain extent, I will do some of that in this episode. But at the same time, it's like, well, they're fucking different movies. And one has one thing to offer, the other has another thing to offer. One has certain things that maybe, going back to the conversation about accessibility, like different films have different entry points for different people.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, if you want to gain access, like sometimes you have to, it's not as easy as press play and you watch the movie, and that sometimes you got to fucking crawl in through the window. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to be invited in. You have to vampire that shit.
Absolutely, yeah.
The key is under the rug. You know, maybe whatever. The point is that it's the exploration. And so looking at those two films, I was just like, yeah, I think I'd rather have of the two in dealing with this aspect of, and spoiler fucking alert, you're talking about after death. I'd rather have the experience of immersion, in and the play of the experience of both separateness but connectivity as an out of body experience, and as a life review. I'd rather have that, which is more experimental, which is less conventional, and I'd rather have that as a so-called like not successful film, or kind of how you described it, or as a failure, and as a conscious work of art, than as something that's going to give me answers and resolve things for me.
Well, I think Noah's film is a noble failure. I don't think it's a complete failure. I admire and enjoy certain aspects of it, and I admire that it's willing to take a chance. My central problem with it is well, there's a couple. It's I've never really cared for that style of first person in that type of filmmaking was first attempted, I think, back in the 40s or the 50s with a film called Lady in the Water or Lady in the Lake. I can't remember.
You mentioned
I mentioned that. Yeah. I didn't like it then, and I don't particularly care for it now. In addition to the acting, which I felt was weak in that film. But also with, and don't get me wrong, Jacob's Ladder and Enter the Void are vastly different films dealing with a vastly different take on life and death,
and a different message,
and a much different message. It is true that I drift towards more conventionally structured narrative stories, and this is, as weird as that might be, that's closer to what Lyne's film is, although it's very different and very fragmented in its storytelling. This is an incredibly frustrating film, and I think if you're watching it for that first time, this is the kind of film that it can't be on in the background. You can't be Um, you can't just be wavering in your attention to what's going on. You have to really be. You really have to give yourself over to the 2 hour experience of watching this. Um, I've been with people. It's and this is a movie watcher thing, but anybody who loves movies knows that you give yourself over to the movie for the most complete level of enjoyment. The problem is that a lot of people, if you're watching this with, say, a girlfriend or a boyfriend, a family member, and they're not really paying attention, they're doing something else, they're on their phone, they're up, they're moving about, or even the kind of person that isn't used to not knowing. I mean, I've been in many situations when I'm with someone and they'll turn to me and say, "What's going on? Who's that? Why did they do that?" And my answer always is, watch the fucking movie. Just sit back and let the movie happen. We don't know who this character is. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what's going on here. And Lyne's film does exactly that. I mean, it's hard to watch it with the perspective of having never seen it before and being unsure of how it's going to play out. For those who haven't seen it, in the 33 years since it first premiered, this is the story of a man's um, dance with death, dance with that moment of death, where everything that happens after his, I wouldn't call it murder, but what would you call it? His experience in Vietnam, an imagined continuation of life, and how real that can be in the moment before you actually die, which is akin to what Noé did with Enter the Void, that moment of death spiraling into the imagination of what could have been life, the loves, the jobs, the disappointments, the sadness, the but also the fear. Line line directing from a script by Bruce Joel Rubin, who would that same year give us Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg, and Ghost.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's the A side to this is the B side of
yeah,
that.
this is the much darker version of that. This is the much more hell bent and fearful image of that. So um, when you watch it, like I, I'll say this much. I believe that this is a film that audiences in 1990 were not prepared for, but would pave the way for David Fincher. Um, David Fincher, 5 years later with Seven, 95, 96, somewhere around there.
In
Um,
terms of like some of the look
the
or
look, the darkness, the potential um, for evil in this world. Now, when you see what you're seeing
the
here,
Christianity in it. Yeah,
yeah, there's a great deal of Christianity. There's a great deal of punishment, suffering, and religious sacrifice in both films. Um, Obviously, Fincher's film is much better, and Fincher is a much better director as compared to the guy that did Flashdance and 9.5 Weeks. Not to disparage him, I think this is a good work, but it's Line was never on my radar as somebody that I had to go see. This film, those two that I just mentioned, Indecent Proposal, and his remake of Lolita. He was never, and to tell you the truth, I don't know what the hell he's doing now. So he was never, he was never this formidable figure in cinema for me. He was never this guy that I can't wait to see what the next Adrian Lyne. Everything seemed like a video, especially like Flashdance, 9.5 Weeks, those films, and we've talked about those in the
and a
past.
certain kind of video.
Yeah, and a certain kind of video, but also coincidentally David Fincher with his direction of Vogue and a number of other videos that would lead into the imagery that he would create for Seven and ultimately Fight Club. So, I'm the film school of the 1970s, UCLA, USC, NYU, would transfer into music videos, learning on the job, learning what the camera could do, learning to work within a budget that would formulate itself into that world. And I think Lyne might have been a production designer before this or something. I think having something to do with fashion. I can't remember, but anyway, what's fascinating about the film are these really powerful, dark images. And he did everything in camera. There's no optical in this film. There's no CGI. And it has a much more overpowering control over the viewer. There is something about that legless black man, very muscular, and that head shaking. I don't know what it means. But it is the thing of dreams and nightmares where you're not supposed to always know what a thing is, what it means, what it's the unconscious psyche playing games with you. And what I like about this film is that it does that descent into hell, where paranoia becomes everything. But it's, as is typical in cinema and storytelling, is it wrong to be paranoid when they're actually after you? When there is something out there, when your government is willing to experiment on you, to use you as a guinea pig in order to maximize a death toll, to win a war, you know, to the myriad opportunities and options that are available to controlling human beings and the public en masse. That's what I like about this film. That's what I love, that it dances in that world, and it does so in a way that just it makes you want to look over your shoulder from time. I don't think it's a great film, but I think it's a damn good film. So, I mean, where do you what part of this would you like to go into? What are you thinking?
I
Yeah.
I like um, I like those elements, and I like the imagery.
Yeah.
I like the non-linear aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it, where you're figuring out. I don't know. Did when you said you first saw it when you were 15?
Yeah.
At, I'm wondering at what point does someone realize, well, he's dead? Um,
At 15, I didn't
because
realize it till the end. I didn't know what was going on. I had not.
because
Yeah.
no, I'm saying because at one point he asks, "Am I dead?"
Yeah. No, he's
Um,
told he's dead. He said, "You're dead," and he's like, "No, I'm alive." He's fighting
but
for life.
I think he asks her after the fever, after the bath where they put him in ice. I think
Hmm.
he's in bed, and I think he asks Elizabeth Pena if he's dead or if he's even alive or something along those lines.
Maybe he did.
And she's like, "No, like you're fine, whatever." I like the idea of having to kind of figure out what's happening to him.
Yeah.
I think that, and this made me, like I said, it made me go back to Enter the Void in the same way that I kind of thought about EO, which was like when at the end of EO, I was EO. I was like,
Hmm.
because in this weird way, remember, Ohazar Baltazar, all this shit is happening to the donkey in Baltazar.
Yeah.
In EO, all this shit is kind of happening to everyone, but everyone is just following. I mean, we are following EO. It was the same thing for me with this. In Jacob's Ladder, we're watching what's happening to him. That the takeaway was like, this is what happened to this character.
Yeah.
Enter the Void opened up this possibility of kind of questioning, like, is this what happens when you die? It was for a specific character, but it opened it up as an experience. It became more universal. Like in Into the Void, the viewer is immersed. Or let me start with Jacob's Ladder. The viewer is separate from the world of that film through the distance of film watching, right?
Yes.
You're separate as a viewer, but you're entertained. You're engaged with what's happening. With Enter the Void, you're immersed in the world through the camera work, but you're at a distance from the characters. And you're challenged. So that kind of opposite way, I think, is what makes it makes Enter the Void oddly more universal, and it makes Jacob's Ladder more specific, because Enter the Void is a film as an experience, and I think Jacob's Ladder is a film that's a visual story. It's story driven.
Sure.
Enter the Void is thematic. Enter the Void is stylized fully. Jacob's Ladder is stylistic, and more so at certain times than at other times. With Enter the Void, you're looking at, it's almost like it's a different world. It's a different reality. With Jacob's Ladder, it's our reality, but it's with someone different. So in that sense, it's easier to accept. It's easier to digest. Enter the Void is a trip. Jacob's Ladder is more like a plot twist. So in that sense, you had said that it's a film that works or that does it right. Yeah, it does it right.
Does it right for me? Does it right for me?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but it does it right the way Ghost does it right, or does it right the way Sixth Sense does
Well,
it right.
it's a more palpable, it's a more audience friendly kind of.
Yeah, it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's a Hollywood Tibetan Book of the Dead versus a psychedelic counterculture Tibetan Book of the Dead. With this kind of like, look at the message, look at the themes. Enter the Void is like these parallel journeys of a death trip and a psychedelic trip as a review of life through space and time, right? And you can say, if there's messaging there, what is it? Okay, well, maybe it's like the transitory nature of existence, which is Buddhist, the illusory nature of the world. You have sex and death that are deeply part of our human condition as embodied beings, and you're going on this journey, sex, death, body scene, Freudian journey with camera perspectives and nonlinear, and the thing of, what's real, and is this what happens when you die, or is this how it would be? Like, is this how close we can get to experiencing that as a viewer, like through cinema? And what the fuck? And kind of DMT, they say, and DMT is produced, it's endogenous, it's produced in our bodies. So they say that when you die, you kind of go on that life review trip. Your life flashes before your eyes, or the back of your eyelids, or whatever. So it takes you on all this shit. And some people, I think, they get turned off by nakedness and sex and whatever. Jacob's Ladder is is dealing with those things in a totally different perspective that is more it's horrific because it's carrying the horrors of war into the horrors of death and the after death consciousness, and it's like this psychological horror as a consequence of war, a kind of like think of it as a post-mortem PTSD. Now if you add MK Ultra and the CIA experiments and the LSD experiments on soldiers, and you get basically an anti-war film. It's a veteran film that it's born on the 4th of July. It's the Deer Hunter, where you have veterans as basically ghosts of themselves. That's the message of the film. You can say, oh, well, it's about this guy who's actually dead and blah, blah, but it's about a veteran who is a ghost of himself. That's it. So what I like is that you can have two different films dealing with what happens after you die, but coming from completely different worldviews, coming from completely different perspectives. I am more, I don't even know if it's say that I'm at home. I don't know that I'm at home with that, or I'm willing, or I want that to be. I don't know. Whatever it is that Enter the Void to me is more of a vibe that resonates with me, but I also think that as a viewer, I get more out of it because I think it has a potential to challenge, to make you think about other shit beyond just what I just saw. It's like, okay, what did I see? What do I need to see again? But also let me carry that into, how was it like what's the trauma of my birth? And another thing that DMT helps to alleviate is also, that your earliest trauma, which is your trauma of, passing through this, think of, you're going into this, in Jacob's Ladder, you're going into this Bellevue, the bowels of Bellevue or whatever hospital it is, and it's this nightmare scene. Well, what happens when, you see the light as an infant, and you're taken out of, your world literally turns upside down. You feel whatever pressure, whatever rush, and then now you're being forced through this tunnel, this canal, into this bright ass fucking light. Something is pulling you. You're fucking pulled into this cold ass, bright as fuck environment outside of like the comfort of wherever you were. That's, there are some people say that's your earliest trauma that's embedded in you, and DMT helps you relive all the way back into, going to Tree of Life, the fucking origins of the universe type shit. That's that. Jacob's Ladder is a powerful anti-war message. I don't know how much of it is lost on the audience if they're just focused on aside from the fucking hammering on the head that you get from the script and from the end cards and all that, we get it. I think it may risk being lost on some people, or else it may be too much of a anti-war message for some people. I don't know. Who gives a fuck? But what I'm just like, okay, that it wraps everything too neatly in a bow at the end. It pats you on the head. Macaulay Culkin says, "It's okay, Dad."
Yeah.
You have a clear. There's a villain, the U.S. government. There's a person to blame for this. The answers are given to you, and it's kind of like, of course, this is the fucking B-side of Ghost.
Yeah.
It can veer into sentimentality, and it's like, well, that's the payoff, is that you understand, okay, he's dead, like, oh, but the guy's dead, but man, he put up a good fight. That's, to me, the weakest aspect of it, is that it completes the circle for you.
Well, right there, you and I are in total agreement, because that's where I feel the film falls apart. That's where I feel the film it does tie it up into a bow, a nice bow, where and I'm not making any excuses for the studio system or for Adrian Lyne selling out as a director, but the original ending was supposed to be much darker. The chemist who has been tracking Jacob and his platoon, who is attempting, who carries all of this guilt from being brought into the CIA and developing, isolating this LSD, isolating the where the LSD would take effect and create the most dangerous, violent killing machine.
Yeah, he's like Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, that kind of thing. He helps Jacob by giving him an antidote, but the whole thing goes to shit, and it continues to eat him up. And it was supposed to be a very violent ending that was far bleaker than what was seen on the screen. I would have loved to have seen that film, because I'm like you. I think this ties it up too nicely. And that was a studio mandated, which is not to excuse it. It's Line had final cut. He should have went for the more extreme, because let's be honest, extreme endings, although not profitable in the moment, would definitely play out as the film achieved greater and greater cult status and became more recognized as Yart. If you look at David
what's
Fincher's,
in the box?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. If you look at Fincher's 7, Andrew Kevin Walker wrote it as "What's in the Box." The studio would not allow that ending. Denied it. It went from "What's in the Box" to a car chase where Kevin Spacey's John Doe character is in the apartment with Gwyneth Paltrow's character threatening to murder her. Brad Pitt is racing through this unnamed city in the rain, trying to get to her before he can kill her, and saves her. Another script would have had one of the dog's head in the box. But I guarantee you that
now we're in The Godfather 2.
Yeah, the reason, beyond Fincher's obvious talent, the look and the performances of that film, including Kevin Spacey's reveal as the murder, which at the time was, it really knocked everybody in the audience that I was watching with out of the park, because they didn't know who. A lot of people weren't familiar with Kevin Spacey at that point, but they were like, "Wait a minute, I do know that guy. I've seen that guy." It was shocking that it would be him.
Yeah, there's a lot of surprises with Kevin Spacey.
We'll get into that one day, but we would not be talking about
films too.
We would not
or
be,
maybe not surprises. Who knows?
Are you done, motherfucker?
Look at fucking American Beauty. Look at fucking
yes, yeah.
You know,
if you want to do, it was always there. Just watch the fucking movies episode. We would have a field day with Kevin Spacey. Yes, we would. There's no doubt about that. But we wouldn't be talking about 7, almost 30 some years later, if Gwyneth Paltrow's head had not been in that box. And there are people to this day who claim I'll never get over seeing Gwyneth Paltrow's head in that box. You never saw her head in the box. Ever.
Right.
It's the
I mean,
power
you
of the
saw it in your
movies.
mind. Yeah.
In your mind, yeah. In your mind, you saw it. But there was never a point there. You did not see Leatherface put that woman on a hook. You did not see the hook go through her chest. People swear to God that they did.
Well, you saw her.
I
You
swear
saw
to
him
God.
put her on the hook, but you didn't see the hook come out. Like you didn't see the hook.
You
just
saw
saw
him
put
pick
her on.
her up and put her towards the hook, and then the next thing you know, he's walking away and she's on the hook. You know, I gotta watch it again, but I don't remember if you actually see him slam her body onto that fucking hook.
Well,
It's
it's one of
crazy.
those things.
It is insinuated, yeah.
You don't remember the double dildo from fucking
Requiem?
from Requiem for a Dream, but it's weird how certain things work like that, or certain
Yeah.
things, certain plot twists
Yeah.
seem they seem organic.
Yeah.
That it's like and we know these Brad Pitt plot twists that seem organic. But then you have the M. Night Shyamalan plot twists that well, not now, but that after a while it was like, well, okay, bring me the plot twist because anything less would be uncivilized.
Yeah.
This is what you do. And you have characters, Enter the Void, you have characters that, and not a lot of films have that, but where the character dies early on in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, well, where the fuck are you going with that?
Yeah.
That's always interesting. So how does one film navigate that and another one doesn't, or whatever? But this one, like I said, it's Hollywood Tibetan Book of the Dead versus, countercultural.
It should have been darker. It should have went with the more bleak ending. But up until that point, I think there's so much of it. I think there's so much to admire, but also not just cinematically admire, but the chances that it takes and the depths that it goes to understand the subconscious and how fears can manifest themselves, and the wonder of, there is a moment where the chemist says, I didn't know men could do that to each other. Is it that it's being thrust upon them, or it's drawing something out of us? Do we have that capacity? When Peckinpah made Straw Dogs, I think a lot of the controversy was, do we have this in us? Do we have this level of violence, this bloodlust? Is it violence for the love of violence, for the enjoyment of killing somebody, or is it more to the effect of we when you threaten something, an animal instinct takes over as a means of self-preservation. I don't know what's going on in this movie. I don't know if the LSD, if the experimentation drew out something that was already there. But that's another element of the film where you're wondering what goes on, what's in the heart of man, what are we capable of,
The heart of man, but also like in the fucking brain, like
yeah, well, it's yeah,
the amygdala, the fucking fight or flight, with psychedelics and with just drugs in general, that people talk about set and setting. What's your mindset?
Yeah.
And what is the setting? Are you in your room with a loved one and you're just like mellow, you're just going to drop acid,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just going to listen to music and have this like night in and just like chill? Or are you going to drop acid and you're going to fucking decide to go to Grand Central Station for the first time?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Probably not a good idea. Yeah.
Probably not a good idea. Because you're going to have a bad trip. And this film is a fucking bad
Oh,
trip.
it's a
And it's
real bad
also
trip. Yeah.
it's like what we project. There's also this idea of like how much of the world. Obviously, we're interpreting the world.
Yeah.
We're interpreting what we see, and we're making meaning out of what we see. But it's also there are even other ideas of like, well, how much of the world is just a projection of your mind? That that on some level we are all part of a shared hallucination, and that the differences between the hallucinations is just your take on the hallucination.
Yeah.
Um, or are we also like manifestations of a simulation or of someone else's hallucination? Or you know what I mean? Even the Taoist kind of like, did I dream that did I wake up and dream that I was a butterfly, or did the butterfly wake up and dream that it was me? Um, and then you throw into the mix of the script these loosely, they're not like tied, but it's just these references, these Bible references of like, okay, Jacob's ladder, this patriarch from the book of Genesis, and it's you're talking about the transmigration of the soul. You're talking about this ladder with the angels going, this dream of going up. The angels are going up and down, and it's like, okay, well, is this tied to historical, like the idea of like Babylon and exile and all that?
Yeah.
How does that fit in? But also like just death, going up, descending, ascending. You talked about Dante's Inferno, the circles of hell. Jezebel, a character, Eli, Jezebel, this Canaanite pagan representation of sexuality, and angels, and Danny Aiello as a fucking angel. And
I was particularly interested in Danny Aiello's but I really want to get into that performance and those scenes. But continue, please.
There was something, and he performs these adjustments. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
he's a chiropractor.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna set you right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also there's the element of like Jacob wrestling with God, or wrestling with this man that is unnamed, or wrestling with the angel.
Yeah.
And it's only after the wrestling that it's like, okay, your name is not Jacob, your name is Israel now. And that's moving the tradition. Now it's moving it forward through this genealogy of Genesis, right? And a character who is wrestling with in that sense, there is some kind of like tie to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, in that it's like the bardo, and like the different elements of the ego's unwillingness to release from life. So that I mean, now I'm tying these two things together. You're wrestling with life, but you just don't know when to fucking let go. And that's the whole idea of like, just let go, man. Like, what did I say last time? From the Tibetan Book of the Dead, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream, the way John Lennon says in Tomorrow Never Knows. The idea of letting go, whether it's John Lennon singing about it, or Maynard James Keenan from Tool with their psychedelic shit, prog rock metal shit, singing about it, it's let go. And if you don't, you're in between. You're in this, and those spaces, those liminal spaces of being in between there's a lot to be gained from them, but it's also, those are traumatic spaces. Teenagehood, all of those spaces, and there is that space between life and death. I mean, as an idea, some people are like, well,
sure.
No, asshole, when you die, the lights go out and that's it. Well, we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about these movies. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that light goes out movie later. When the music's over, turn off the light, But it gets into, he's reading these books on demonology. How much of it is that he's creating his hell Is this a dream? Look at how much shit we fucking project in our own days. You know what I mean? Like, so there's elements of that, but there's also elements of the U.S. government, like we talked about. But then there's the quote, this mystical Christianity comes out of the film, where it's, if you're frightened of basically the message is that if you're afraid to die and you're clutching, you're holding on, you'll see that the devils that are grabbing you or tearing you. But once you find peace, then you see that the devils are actually angels, freeing you from this earth, or freeing you from the earth.
What do they say? Hell is burning that last bit of your soul that wants to stay alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of, I think, what I kind of, part of me is like, that's cool. Part of me is also, as a 90s person, part of me rolls my eyes, because I'm like, well, now you're being sentimental. Now you're
See, that's what I like about it. I like the romanticism of it. I like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in that, but I like, there's certain elements of the church and mass that I admire. I like the tradition. I like the pageantry of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of like what I like in this story too, because I don't believe it, but there's something about God versus the devil that, I don't know if it's the oldest story, but it's at least one of the oldest stories that sticks with us and tries to explain certain things. And that speech that Aiello gives to him, that him trying to guide him, set him right, as you say, with the chiropractic. I felt those scenes were very I felt the scenes with Aiello were very moving. And there was a gentleness and a sweetness to Aiello's character that I hadn't seen in any other movie that he had ever done. I mean, he usually plays a big, boisterous, tough guy kind of character. And in this, he has that moment, but there's a great deal of love for Jacob. There's a great deal of fatherly kind of caring for this character that I thought shone a light on both Danny Aiello and the story. It was really my favorite part of the movie.
And I know more than you.
Yeah.
There's a Mona Lisa smile to Danny Aiello that kind of veers or can veer into the creepy.
Yes, can.
But I mean, it's one of those things. It's interesting how, obviously, we're talking about how the character could be projecting, or how these projections and whatever else. It's kind of like, if you go to pet a dog and you're petting it from the top, you might be wanting to just pet the dog, but the dog's like, "Fuck you, I don't know you," whatever, and it growls. But it didn't know that you were meant to. You were actually trying to be an angel, but it thinks of you as a devil. It's that perspective. If you have something coming to take you to whatever, look at the baby metaphor, what I talked about. The doctor and the nurses and all that are trying to help this baby to be born, to bring the baby into the outside world.
Sure.
But the trauma of birth, you come into the world screaming, what the fuck, right? And I mean, even just symbolically, like, he's setting his fucking spine. The yogis say, healthy spine, healthy life. And look at the fucking, going back to Tree of Life, look at the Tree of Life is also the ladder, Jacob's ladder. It's ascending, descending, genealogy, family, things that the character is thinking about, his children. Your spine is the fucking Jacob's ladder. Your spine is the tree of life. Look at the fucking nerves. You know what I mean? Like it.
Oh yeah.
I've always said that and I'm projecting because I am, and
Yeah.
that's fine. And this is what we do when you watch a lot of movies,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
you through all these films, you're making a mosaic kind of whatever mythology you're building on that is your own. Look at what you did. We did an episode on you. We did an episode on me.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get into fucking teaser statement right now is like we're getting into Indiana Jones soon. Indiana Jones is on my life partner, my partner, whatever, girlfriend, lover, whatever, Leslie, the Daniello of my world.
Your old lady.
My chiropractor.
Your Danny Aiello. Oh, I can't wait till she hears that.
I'll crack my spine. That's like on her fucking list. Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
That's part of the origin story. You know what I mean? Like the things that make sense. And as we watch these films and we look at the mythology of this podcast, the history of the movies that we've been talking about, and where it's gone from the way you started out,
Yeah.
where you've gone. You picked me up off the street, brought me into your home. We fight.
Yeah.
And each episode and we're gathering more of these cinema street urchins and bringing them with us on this fucking journey just to fucking examine not only the movies, but to examine, as Prince said, this thing called life, you know?
Yeah.
And death. So it's all projection. But what else is it? What else is there, you know?
Absolutely.
So, one of the questions is where do we go from here? But it's also, you talk about, and I hadn't thought of it this way, this kind of setting up some of the aesthetics or the vibe or whatever of some of this early 90s this is being an early version of some of this 90s stuff. Go into more of that.
I think a film like the darkness of the films that would come out in the 1990s wouldn't have been possible to the same degree if a film like this hadn't opened a kind of door. I mean, this is an incredibly brave film for. I can't imagine that the look of the film or the material would be considered box office gold. And yet, I think it's one of the important films of the decade that doesn't get enough recognition. Partly because it sells out so badly at the end. I mean, the ending is not good. I think it's a cop out. It's too easy. It comes out of nowhere. It's very abrupt, and then it's let me feel good. Let me feel as good as I can watching a man die in Vietnam with his guts, spilled out over the table. But he fought hard. Yeah, there's something to that. But to be able to go into darker films of the 1990s, such as obviously Seven, Fight Club, 8mm.
Requiem.
Yeah, Requiem. Hopeless. There's a hopelessness that exists in life that major studio films do not want to acknowledge. And with the advent of boutique cinema, such as Fine Line Features, which was an offshoot of New Line, um, they all had they 20th Century Fox had one, Universal, Warner, everybody had boutique style offshoot cinema production houses that would do films that were closer to this type of sentiment for much lower budgets. So in that time, you saw bleaker films. You saw something like Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights, which, as distant from this, I don't think you would have been able to. There's a darkness there. There's a discomfort, an uncomfortability in watching something that is taboo and trying to normalize it. Not even trying to normalize it, actually normalizing it and showing how common, even in an extreme world, the 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 facets of our lives are apparent. The mother-daughter relationship, the son, the misguided, all of that comes into play in an era that would really test what cinema was capable of. I mean, it was the last great decade. The 1990s was the last great decade of movie making. And it's crazy because we had the 70s, we had this shit era of the 1980s, the 90s came back with a vengeance, and the 2000s, it's as if the studios have gained control and will not let go. There is no experimentation. There is no. I can't remember the last film that I saw in a theater that really challenged me. Or no, I can. The Gray, and that was what, 12, 13 years ago.
Mm,
That was the last time that
yeah.
I watched a film that really attacked my senses, both my physical senses, hearing, sight. Um, you could feel goosebumps in you, but also that hopelessness of what it is to fight for survival and yet lose in the end.
In general, or in the theater itself?
Well, that's a very good question because um, you have seen it come out in long form television. You've seen it with Milch's Deadwood, with David Chase's The Sopranos, Vince Gilligan with Breaking Bad, and then Better Call Saul. So I said a long time ago to you, we had this discussion where I felt it's not such a bad thing that things are going to streaming in the sense that we're talking about long form storytelling. So episodic TV that is part of it. It's almost like Dickens in the 1800s, where you were writing chapters and those chapters were being published in magazine format. So you were going back to them, going back every each month. There was a new there was a new chapter to Pip's story.
Yeah, new
How was
installment or
Yeah, a
whatever.
new installment? How was Magwitch going to come back? Was Havisham going to reveal herself for what she was? All of this is playing out, and that's happening on TV with bleak and very pessimistic, cynical worldviews. All of those series that I mentioned, Deadwood, The Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, The Wire, all of these are very bleak stories that are, in a sense, hopeless. And going back to the conversation that you and I were having even before we got on the air, there is a hopelessness in society in being able to, in being preached the American dream without any way to actually achieve it. Um,
It's
that's
it's
frightening.
it's interesting. It's interesting because it's like, well, a couple things, different things.
Yeah.
I mentioned The Sixth Sense. It's kind of like, well, The Sixth Sense is also a child of Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
Ghost and Jacob's Ladder are the co-parents or whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's that. In terms of, for me, in terms of something that I've seen that's challenged or hit me in terms of all of these different senses, I return to Gaspar Noé.
Yeah.
His work really affects the senses because his
Absolutely.
style is so visual and so immersive that to me it's kind of like, and then I mean, to get back into the drug thing too, it's kind of like, well, once you go to certain places, it's kind of like other things don't hit the same way.
No, they don't.
So it's, pick your poison.
Yeah. I'll say this much about Gaspar Noé. I don't think that what he's doing with the two films that I've seen, and I can't speak to the others, but I don't consider him a gratuitous filmmaker. I don't see him as a filmmaker that is just attempting to shock like an Eli Roth would, or somebody who I don't, I admire his artistic sensibility. And I really think Irreversible is an incredibly powerful film. I think Enter the Void could have been. I just didn't particularly care for the style that he shot it with. If he had dispelled with the first person aspect of it and told it from, it's just not a style of filmmaking that I really embrace.
So yeah, I think had he done that, it would have been closer to Jacob's Ladder because it would have been that guy. It would have been about him.
Yeah.
Where I think the first person fucks you up, and it's kind of like, well, but at the same time, I do think it leaves that space to bridge the gap. To where it's like, oh, this could be me. This could be any. Is this to open up the question? Like I said earlier, is this what happens?
See, I see. I kind of see what you're saying, where you call Enter the Void more universal, and being able to step in where it's almost like a mask that you're wearing, or VR, or whatever. You step into that. But I can't make that leap as a moviegoer. I can make that leap if I see the character, if I see their face, if I see the reaction and emotion, and it's just more of a real film to me. It's more of a real story, and it's able to capture my interest a lot better. So it comes down to, what do you like? Does this style is either going to work for you or it's not. For you, it obviously works. For me, it's problematic. I can't get on board, and that's a shame because I think it's I think for what he gets on that screen, it could have been, for me, it could have been potentially much greater than the end product. While with Jacob's Ladder, I like this journey. I like this descent into hell, and I'm just unable to give it a wholehearted endorsement because of the abrupt cookie cutter ribbon ending. It's the major failing in the film for me.
I think it's like two different ways of I think Jacob's Ladder is when you look at a picture of someone, And the way you kind of, the way I interpret what you said about being able to relate to a film through the you're looking at that other person, um, it's like you're looking at a picture of a person, and you're like, oh, I could see how this person looks like me.
Yeah.
Um, and so you relate on that level, and it's like, oh, well, how would it be to be that person in this book, in this picture? I mean, like if I were that person, type of thing. But in a way, it's kind of like looking at. Have you seen?
Yeah.
I get the feeling that you haven't, but there, you can go to a website that shows you pictures, AI generated pictures of people that never existed. They're AI generated. And you're looking at these people, but they're not people. They're just pictures. They're just generated images of people, but they're not real people. And from that, I mean, I've done that, and something at one point I was looking at it, and I was telling Lizzie, I was like, there's something really, really sad about this to me.
Yeah.
Because I felt bad. I actually felt bad for these people, because I'm like, they never fucking existed. And I somehow, and because of, you have mirror neurons in your brain, you like can empathize with people. But they never fucking existed.
Well,
right?
there's nothing there. They're plus, in a weird way, they're slaves to whatever the creator wants them to do or be, or
Well, they're just images. They're just still images. It's like as if if you were able to draw like super realistically whatever, and you just were to just from imagination, you just draw a picture of a wizard or whatever.
No, I've seen that. I've seen that on Instagram where these pictures of these women, and it says AI generated, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, God damn, there's a soulless to it. There's a soullessness to it, and
Because it's not a person.
right.
Yeah,
It's not a person.
it's just an image.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if it's kind of like, okay, now just look at one of those pictures and be like, wow, and you're dealing emotionally with this stuff, but it's like there's a barrier there, I think, in the same way that there's a barrier between you and Jacob's Ladder or me and Jacob's Ladder. It's like, fuck, that could be me. How would it be if it were me? Blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, well, that thing is just a picture.
Yeah. Sure.
I think something like Into the Void is like, rather than looking at a picture, if you go to the nearest window, and let's say it's not super bright to where all this light is coming in, but you can see outside. But if you stand at a certain distance from the window, you can also see a reflection.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know that. Yeah.
But you can see out, but you can also see your own reflection because there's enough shadow behind. And I think Into the Void is more like that, where you're seeing outside, but you're seeing yourself. And it's this kind of weird thing. So it's not the same as looking at a mirror, but you are looking at your reflection, but you're also looking like past that into other shit. So that's how I, at this moment, think of these two films.
Yeah.
And what would, let's say now you're looking outside the window at the person that's in the picture from Jacob's Ladder. It's a different experience because you can see yourself, but you can also see that person through the glass.
Sure.
Versus this picture of this person that may have never existed. What does that mean? That's what the two different films are to me.
I get that.
And I think there's more to be gained from looking out the window and also seeing yourself and seeing that person out there than just seeing the picture of this other person and imagining what it would be.
See, between the two films, Jacob's Ladder works better as a story for me, whereas Enter the Void, I think I would rather read that story. I would rather read a first person account. And thinking about it now makes me think maybe I should pick up Burroughs' Naked Lunch again. I haven't attempted that in 30 years. Maybe it's time to find. Maybe I'm ready for that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Does that? I mean,
Hmm.
does that make sense? Where it's like, I don't want to see the visual of it. I want to see. I want to hear somebody's description and explanation of what that is and how they're experiencing it. And I think Naked Lunch might be the beginning and the end of that story, as far as the great ones are concerned. Burroughs did something, and I don't know. Maybe it's time to go back to it. I don't know. I can't be sure.
But you have options, you know.
Yeah, I do.
You've
Yeah.
got that. You can read or listen to Terrence McKenna talking about his shit,
Hmm.
and he talks a lot.
Yeah.
Um, you can take drugs.
See,
This is not a. I'm
that's
not
the thing that
promoting
that's the thing that
anything
scares the
illegal.
shit out of me.
I'm
That
just saying.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's
Um,
like I can't imagine like Enter the Void openly embraces that, and that's and especially hallucinogenics have always scared the shit out of me. When we were
I
talking
think the
earlier about
yeah.
that, uh, any hallucinogenic experience that I would have would probably be a bad one because of my fear of it. I think it would draw out the worst. So
I
it's
mean,
not for
yeah.
me.
The I think certain parts of society are decriminalizing it, and they're realizing like potential benefits,
Hmm.
psychological benefits, and potentially, however you want to define it, spiritual benefits, even if that just means psychological benefits.
Yeah.
Uh, just in terms of talking about story, it helps with our stories of ourselves. It. Do you want to do a Timothy Leary fucking everybody fucking take acid all the time, and kids should enjoy acid, and children,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, slow the fuck down. Um,
Yeah.
but at that point, it's also fucking watch more movies. You know what I mean? Like
The
that's
answers
a
are
fucking
there.
like
More questions,
the.
but answers too.
I mean, there's also yeah. What movies are you watching? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
psychedelic just means mind expanding, and just fucking there are multiple ways of trying to achieve that before we actually go on the trip of death itself, which we will do that.
Absolutely. We will.
So watch more fucking movies. Open your mind.
Open that mind. Watch some more movies. We thank you very much for your for your continued appreciation listening to this show, and thank you those of you who have decided to throw us a couple dollars here and there. You can't even begin to imagine how much we appreciate it. We'll be back next week with an all new episode. Can't wait to talk to you. Bye bye.